Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Vital MX pre-game show. We are going to be using this time each week to place a spotlight on all that is happening in the world of Supercross and Motocross. Now, of course, a majority of the focus will be on the Super Motocross World Championship, but we will also be taking a look at MXGP, some of those obscure national championships in different corners of the globe, because interesting stuff happens everywhere, and this will be your one-stop shop to keep up with all of that. Now, first off, Daytona Round 8 of Monster Energy Supercross is fast approaching, and this is a very interesting time for Daytona to appear on a schedule. Why? Well, Eli Tomac, who has an impeccable record at Daytona, is back on form. He's slayed some of those demons from the start of the year. He points to a major overhaul of his YZ450F on the weekend off as the reason for that. And what we saw in Arlington, Texas was much more similar to the Tomac that we have come to know and love. In fact, I would argue that the way that he rode in Arlington was better than how he rode at all last year, when he was storming towards the championship.
One thing's for sure is I have improved and I'm getting better. So yeah, I'm ready to put up the fight in this last half and maybe show some of the young guys that they're still young.
If you look at the graph on screen, it's rare for Tomac to go winless across the first 7 rounds of a season. In fact, the last time it happened was 2016, the first year that he raced for Kawasaki, and if you remember that year there were a lot of setup issues, and Daytona aside, interestingly, it just didn't look like the Tomac that we'd come to know, kinda similar to the start of this year in many ways. So, will Tomac add a win to his column in Daytona? You would think so. Smart money would be on Tomac, again with the knowledge that he is now quote-unquote fixed. More important though, in my mind at least, is if he can win or finish on the podium in Daytona, he will establish some momentum and some consistency. If you look at the line graph on screen now, he has been wildly inconsistent thus far. There is no pattern with his results. So if he can string 2 solid weekends together, that'll be worth its weight in gold. That'll be so helpful to his charge towards the red plate. That is, of course, currently owned by Jet Lawrence of Honda HRC. If you look at the comparison on screen now, it's bizarre how similar Jet and Cooper have been through 7 rounds. At a glance, you wouldn't think so. Jet has had a bit of a hold of the season since round 1, whereas Cooper has been on at points but also off. Ultimately, they have the same number of wins, similar podiums, similar points of course, similar heat wins. It's a really interesting comparison, and that will fuel Cooper's fire. Don't forget that Cooper has been very close to Tomac at Daytona in recent times, certainly Tomac's biggest competitor at Daytona, so whilst all focus goes on Jet and Eli this weekend, I would imagine that Cooper likes his chances. An upset, perhaps? Chase Sexton is dealing with deep bone bruising in his hand currently, and although he points to the fact that he's 80%, it's worth noting that he did get to ride this week. There's no doubt that he has to remind everyone why he has the number 1 plate, and catapult himself back into the conversation quite quickly. I'm not sure that Daytona is the place for him to do that. I would argue that there are other stops on the calendar that suit him much better than Daytona, but it's time for him to just remind his competitors of his presence, because I would imagine if you dive into the minds of Cooper, Jet, maybe even Eli now, they're not as worried about Chase Sexton as they once were. Everyone has seen Austin Forkner's crash from Arlington, and incredibly, he escaped without needing any surgery. He injured his lower back and his shoulder quite severely, but it seems as though that will all heal without needing surgery, which is nothing short of a miracle based on the magnitude of his crash. He took to social media earlier today, Wednesday, to share an update with his fans, remind everyone that he's okay. There's definitely been some worry there, especially after Kawasaki released a very vague statement saying that he suffered scapular and spine injuries. A spine injury, yes, but we're all thankful that that will heal without needing surgery. It certainly could have been much worse, and Forkner kind of shared that in his social media post.
My L3 and L4, the transverse processors or tabs or whatever that come off of the spine. I broke those on L3 and L4 on my right side. I broke my scapula or my shoulder blade all the way across the top into my like shoulder socket. So across the top and then into my shoulder socket. I had bleeding in my lungs. Still coughing up some blood this morning. Bleeding or bruising in my lungs or whatever. And then obviously they said I was out for like 5 minutes.
Jalek Swoll crashed in the same section as Forkner. It seems as though he will be okay, so Triumph will be back on track very soon and able to continue their strong start to their motocross campaign. News this week, Guillaume Farès crashed at the Baker's factory in the Whoops and broke his femur. Guillaume has been quiet through 2 rounds, but that's great. So often rookies grab headlines with massive crashes, drama. Guillaume has been quietly solid and exceeded the expectations of most. It's a huge bummer that he's now out and unable to build on that momentum, but I would imagine that we will see him again towards the end of the outdoors. A broken femur does take time, but perhaps we'll see him again before the year is out. We mentioned Triumph there, and they are not the only manufacturer who are attempting to break into motocross and take a piece of the pie, as it was. Beta have entered 450 Supercross and have found their feet after a difficult start, and Stark are desperately trying to break into a major series and compete against the combustion engines. They have had some success with that, in fact. They raced in the Arenacross UK series, which wrapped up in London on the weekend just gone, and they won it. Jack Brunel, a rider who has competed in the Arenacross UK series for some time, always come up just short of the championship. He won it with Stark his first year with the team, and it was a major moment for Stark, underlining their competitiveness, but also their desire to compete. And for them to win in the first real championship that they've competed in, well, that will make headlines. On Sunday, the annual Hawkstone International took place with a lot of big names. Jeffrey Herlings was there, Roman Fevre was there, Andrea Adamo was there, Paul Jonas was there, Jeremy Sewer was there. It was Jeffrey Herlings' first race of the year and first motocross race since his injuries towards the tail end of last year. You'll remember he did compete in a beach race, but that didn't end too great, and the less said about that, the better. Herlings went 4-1-1 on a day. He suffered with horrible arm pump in the first race, which was to be expected, but he looked much more like himself in the second and third motos. He was pushed, it's not like he dominated, but this is a solid start, and you can see in his body language after the race, there's a glint in his eye, and he believes that he's heading in a good direction. Jeffrey Herlings with confidence is an interesting dynamic, let's say. MXGP starts in 10 days in Patagonia, Argentina. That will be the same weekend as the Alabama Supercross. As I said, there's a lot going on in different corners of the world. It's an interesting time in the world of motocross and supercross. Not only do we have all of the supercross contenders healthy, but as it stands, touch wood, there is one more preseason race this weekend in Lierop, the Netherlands. All of the MXGP contenders are healthy heading into round 1. Herlings is fighting fit, Geyser, Fevre, Sewer, Prado, of course. Prado actually raced outdoors for the first time this past weekend as well. He won the Spanish Championship at his home track, Lugo, which will debut on the MXGP calendar later this year. His only competition was Ruben Fernandez. I believe they split moto wins, but still, Prado got his outdoor campaign off to a good start as well. If you're keeping track, Herlings, Prado and Geyser all won their first outdoor races of the year. So there's a bit of a confidence battle there. They all feel that they're the guy. That's going to create one heck of a race when gates drop in Patagonia, Argentina. And finally, let me leave you with this. You may have seen that Triumph launched their TF250X to the world's media this week in Gainesville, Florida. They are making major strides in their ambition to take over motocross, and this doesn't stop here. The 450 will be released in the latter half of 2024, at the end of the year. There are still intentions of them racing it in 2025. There were rumours that the 450 was behind schedule, but those seem to be false. And another little Triumph nugget that I have for you is don't expect them to make youth bikes just yet. I believe that there is still a little bit of an internal conversation about whether the youth models should have a combustion engine or if they should just go fully electric with 50s, 65s, 85s and kind of get their foot in that door. You may know Triumph acquired Osset, an electric bike manufacturer from the UK, last year. They predominantly focus on youth models, so that lines up perfectly strategically for the future. So expect a lot more to come from Triumph in the coming years. And of course, Ducati will be here sooner rather than later. In fact, Paolo Cibatti, the head of Ducati's off-road program, will be in Daytona, meeting with teams and just taking in the environment, making notes, and figuring out how Ducati can conquer this space similar to MotoGP. So, there you have it. Supercross, Motocross, MXGP, Arenacross, Triumph news. We've tried to include a lot in this episode of the Vital MX pre-game show. As mentioned, the ambition is for this to be your one-stop shop for all things motocross. So stay tuned next week when we'll recap Daytona, the final pre-season international in Europe, which Herlings, the Yamaha riders, the Koonens will be racing at. Lierop, the Netherlands, a great track. There's a lot to look forward to. So we will see you next week.